What's up, Tube? Welcome to Loguido's Chop Shop, the second best gel blaster channel on the tubes, and 100% of every day of my life, all of the time, someone is emailing me saying, my blaster's broken, what's wrong with it? Or my blaster does this, what's wrong with it? What does it mean when it makes this noise? How do I fix it? And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to run you through some troubleshooting techniques specifically for GBB. This is for GBB. If you've got a GBB that's playing up and it's not doing what it's supposed to do, I'm going to run you through how to troubleshoot it and how to work out exactly what it is that's not working. Now, to some people this might seem self-explanatory, but obviously to a lot of people it's not, just judging by my inbox. The gel blasters, GBBs, everything in general is a system, and parts of that system have to follow a process, a flow, and if one part of that flow is missing or not working, then the system doesn't operate and you're not going to have a good day. So what we need to do is break down the process of what actually goes on in the GBB to start with. So first of all, right at the start is your potential storage, which is your magazine. Your gas goes into the magazine, and the magazine itself could be part of the problem, but a good way to check that is to just fill it up. And then listen. This particular mag is completely silent, so it's good. So if you are having leaks from the valves down here or up here, then you may need to change valves or O-rings in that magazine. There is also a big O-ring in the base, around the base in here, that can also potentially be a breach just around the outside of this silver bit. So if you are getting leaks coming from around this base, you will need to change the O-ring inside that by undoing that screw and changing the O-ring there. Now, of course, you want to make sure that you empty the gas out of it before you attempt doing anything like that. But in this case, the gas seems fine. So we don't have a problem with the magazine. So what actually happens in the GBB is when the hammer strikes this valve here, it lets gas come out of this exhaust, and that exhaust in turn goes up into the GBB and operates it. So yep, there's gas coming out, that valve's working. I don't see any problems with this magazine, so let's see what happens when I put this magazine into the blaster. Alright, I've just refilled it again because obviously I just purged it a second ago, so it is full. Let's see what happens. Oh, that's not good. What's happening there? You pull the trigger, it seems to be, there's a lot of gas coming out, not working very well. Let's investigate further. Probably the first thing you want to do before doing anything is just take the slide off. I might have done that a bit quick for those of you who aren't too familiar with the GBBs. You pull these two tabs down, one on each side, and slide the slide forward. I would initially just make sure that everything is lubed up. Make sure that the slide is freely moving and not catching on anything. Make sure there's no rough sections here. Seems to operate alright. Everything it's not catching up anywhere. So just make sure you've got lube on these parts where the slide actually slides as well, so that the slide can move freely. The other thing that you want to have a look at next is this BBU here. Now for those who don't understand how the system works, the exhaust valve here, where the gas comes out, actually marries up to that little BBU, that square there. So this gasket here seats on that and provides a seal between the magazine and the BBU. When the gas comes out of that magazine, it's directed from this BBU down this nozzle and into the barrel behind the gel, which is in the barrel, and then it forces the gel out the barrel. And I'll show you that nozzle here. Just remove the barrel. So there's the nozzle. The nozzle seats into the chamber there, and when the gas comes out there, that's what propels your gel out of the barrel. So probably next thing we want to look at is it firing something? Like if you load a gel in there, is there gas coming out of there? So that's the next test we will do. We'll get a chrono and we'll test that. Alright, I've popped it back together. I've got a chrono here. Just going to alright. Still not operating, but the shot came out at 222 FPS, which is what I actually expect for this particular blaster. When it was operating at its peak performance, it was doing about 220 FPS. So, so it appears that the part that you know, allows the gas to come out through the nozzle and fire the gel down the barrel, that appears to be working. So it's worth investigating what happens next. And so after the gel has been ejected by a gas force coming out of this nozzle, inside this BBU there is actually a little valve, and I'm going to pull this apart and show it to you. Alright, so undo this screw here, just one screw, and this BBU should be able to come out. Now they can be quite tightly fixed in the slide sometimes, so it's just be careful and do it gently. Work your way up. There we go. And there is springs in here as well, so don't lose them when you pop this up. There's two in this one. One stayed in, one fell out. Alright, so let's just forget about those springs for a moment. Let's take a look at this nozzle. So inside this nozzle here, there is a little valve. And that valve is held in by this tiny little screw there. So I'm just going to pop that screw out. Now this valve is not generally anything that fails, so you shouldn't really ever have to do this, but I'm showing it to you for the purposes of understanding what is actually going on in here. Once you've got that screw out, you can use a pick or something to grab that retainer. That's the retainer, and then the valve should come out. And there is also a spring in there. So that spring sits in front of that valve, and what actually happens is the gas, I might actually zoom in on this for you, just for educational purposes. So the gas actually comes through these ports in the side here, and then through the middle of this there, which then goes down the nozzle and, you know, pushes the gel out of the barrel. Now this spring here is a very soft spring, and the pressure of the spring is actually softer than the pressure of the gas, and so as the gas builds up behind this valve, it pushes that valve down against that spring, and it actually closes the valve in here. So it pushes this piece down to there, which closes it off, so the gas is no longer coming through here through those, and it's now the gas is building up behind this, in this part of the nozzle, and there is actually a seal back here. So what that actually does is it expands this BBU, so the nozzle actually pushes this BBU back, which is actually what's pushing the slide back. So the gas pressure initially ejects your gel, but once the pressure has pushed this little spring closed, it then directs the pressure of the gas backwards to move the slide back. And in moving the slide back, has a whole series of events following that, which we'll talk about later back in here. But that's basically what resets your hammer and everything for the next round. So potentially, if what's happening in our blaster, we're shooting the gel, but we're not getting the blowback to function, potentially there could be an issue with this valve. I don't think it is in this particular case, but it's worth checking this out, just cleaning this with like a Q-tip or something, and getting a bit of oil in there and making sure everything's lubricated and functioning. Alright, so I'm just going to put a drop of oil in there, pop the spring and the poppet valve. Some people call this a poppet valve. There's various names for it, but it's a poppet valve essentially. And then this little piece here is the retainer for that. When you're putting it back in, make sure that this hole, this one here, there we go, lines up with this one, because that's where the screw is going to screw in to hold it in place. Alright, and then we need to pop the tiny screw back in there. Just make sure that's all nice and clean and oiled. Just make sure that poppet valve functions nice and cleanly. Pop it back, pop the nozzle back into the BBU. course make sure that that moves nice and freely there. Also worth just putting a drop of oil in here as well, because that's worthwhile. Keeping that nice and lubed, because the pressure, once this poppet valve here closes, the pressure fills this chamber. That's what pushes this back, which operates the slide. So we do want that nice and smooth as well. So we'll just make sure that's free of debris and nicely lubed and oiled. Alright, I'm going to pop this back in. Pop the springs back in. I don't think you necessarily need to have two springs here. A lot of the time it only operates on one, but it's got two, so whatever. I like to leave these in the top like that, and then push the slide down over the top of them like that, and push it up from underneath so that you don't lose the springs when you tip it upside down trying to put them in, if that makes sense. Alright, and finally pop that screw that retains that into the slide back in as well. While you're at it, bit of oil in here, never goes astray on these moving parts there. Alright, pop the blaster back together, and we can see if what we've done has made any difference. Everything seems to feel fairly nice, but I'm not sure that's actually what the problem was originally. So, oh, that has no gas in it, so gas that up. Alright, let's see. Okay. It's kind of a bit better than it was, but the slide's now only popping back about this far. And if we look in here, this is the hammer unit in here, and just down in there, you'll see it when I pull the trigger, just down in here is the actual striker that strikes the gas valve. Now what happens is you pull the trigger, the striker strikes that gas valve, and you can see as long as that striker is pushed forward, it's going to be pushing the mag valve open, allowing gas to flow into that, out of the mag and into that BBU. So what's happening is it allows the gas to flow, the gel has been pushed out the front, the poppet valve has closed, it's now pushing the slide back. So as the slide comes pushing back, it first hits this, and it hits this, so it hits these two bars here. You can see these things that are sticking up. It hits this, it hits this. One of these, that actually resets the trigger, so it hits that, and that resets the trigger. And due to the way that the sides of these BBUs are designed, the operation is staggered, so it's not in order of as it occurs here. So this is actually probably, I think, the last bit that hits. But so trigger reset, the bearing, it hits this bearing here, and it rolls this hammer back, locks that back, resets the trigger, and if you look down in here, you see that the striking valve's still poking out, but as the slider's slid back and pushed down this and this, it also hits that, which resets the striker valve. So, if the slide is not sliding all the way back, then it may not be resetting all of these parts correctly. So it's seems like it is just making that reset. And for some people, that's what they prefer, because that's the whole idea of short stroking. You can basically allow the slide to move just the minimum amount required to be able to reset all the things, load another gel and go again. That way you get the fastest operation. But in this case, this isn't short stroked, this is just not operating properly, and it appears that everything up in the slide, the BBU and everything here, is very good condition and working properly. The problem is down here. So we can actually prove that, and this is a little tip that I probably should have let you in on early on in the video. But if you do have, say, like another blaster with a known working 100% working pieces, you can actually just sort of borrow some pieces from it. So like, say for example, I use this frame and hammer that I know are working, and then I just kind of pop that top slide on there. Then I can take that slide on the known good frame and use it, and I can see that it is operating successfully on that slide. Sorry, on that frame. So you know that the problem is not in the top end of the blaster. You can even take the slide from your known good blaster, slide it onto your troublesome blaster. Always pays to have a friend who's got the same model if you don't have multiples of the same model. And then you can make sure, yeah, see, so even though I know this slide works on the other frame, which is good, when I put this slide onto this frame, it exhibits the exact same problems that I was having in the first place with this slide. So this tells me that the problem is not in the slide, but it is actually in the frame, and that points us towards the hammer unit. Again, apologies if I'm stating the obvious at any point here, because I'm trying to make this as simple a process for breaking down the components and what could be the thing that's going wrong. So there's so many different little things that can cause an issue, and I'm just trying to break it down into every last little bit. So at this point we know a few things. We know that this slide, this BBU and everything in the upper here is operating. Something in the lower here is not working. We know that there's enough gas getting out the barrel to give 220 FPS, which is what we expect. So we know that there's enough gas pressure, and that's operating the firing mechanism. But when we're getting to blowback, the gas pressure seems to be running out. So what could be causing that? It's like it's got to be in the hammer unit here, because it's basically, that's the only operating part that that happens down here in the frame. So chances are that the spring in this hammer has probably gotten weak over time. It still feels pretty good, but it's probably a little bit weak and probably could do with a replacing. So that's my deduction from looking at this. So to get that out, we're going to undo Phillips head screw here, number 1 Phillips, just one there, and then we're going to knock this pin out. bit tough to get out sometimes. Alright, now that that BBU is free, you have to just pull the trigger and it will flick the BBU up out of the frame, but just beware, this little spring here, on the other side here, I've said it a number of times, it does like to eject, so make sure you don't lose that guy. It's worth checking the sear at this stage as well, because this sear has a tendency to wear out from the trigger bar, but that one's looking in pretty good nick, so no dramas there. Alright, I have to remove this spring here for the sear. Just pops out of there. Just take the sear pressure off, and now I have to push this pin out here, and that's the pin that holds the hammer and the hammer spring in the assembly. So, I mean, you could take the shotgun approach and just replace the whole assembly. These standard P1s aren't, you know, they aren't much chop to begin with, but I'm gonna go with replacing that with a new spring, and we'll see how we go. I'll keep this just as it is and just put a new spring in. Okay, got a replacement spring there. Sits on the hammer assembly like that, and then pops back in here. Now, if you're sneaky, you can potentially pop this back in. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it from behind a tripod here. It is super awkward, but if you can just push that back and get the shaft back in, saves you from having to completely disassemble the whole hammer assembly. Alright, I think I did alright there. And there we go. Make sure you don't pop it through too much on this side either, because your trigger bar does slide through there. And if you've got this shaft sticking out too much on this side, it'll hang your trigger bar up. So you have a little bit of stick out on this side, but none on that side. Again, we want to pop this spring back into the striking valve there. This spring in particular, this one, seems to be a little bit longer on this end than most, so seems to want to be a little bit difficult to hook in here. Sorry if my hands are in the way, it's really awkward to do this. But yeah, this spring does pop down back into here. Try and get this on camera. Try and get this on camera. There. The tail on that spring there was unusually long for these. Usually they're a little bit shorter than that, and you can just sort of hook them in there quite easily. Make sure the other end of that spring is hooked up on the seat of your sear here, so your sear's still sprung there. That's what that spring does. Just here back forwards. One for the hammer. Everything looks healthy there. And of course the hammer reset bar and its little spring that likes to jump away and bounce across the desk. Alright, pop that back into the trigger bar there, slide it back in to your frame, get that screw in there. I don't know if some people prefer pin first and then screw, or screw first and then pin. I'm not sure that it really matters all that much, but go screw there, and then I'll just tap the pin in from the other side. I like to try and get it even. Nope, I'll pop all the way through. There we go. Alright, put that old spring aside. Push down all these so that the slide can come back on. Get that slide on and we'll give it a crack. Alright, so let's give it a crack now. Alright. Yeah, that's a lot nicer now. It's locking back. The slide's going all the way back and locking when it shoots. So yeah, that's a good sign now that we've fixed the issue. So the issue was indeed that this spring had gone a bit soft, and so it seems like the striker wasn't holding the valve open enough to allow enough gas to move the slide back. There was enough gas to actually fire the gel, but not enough to actually slide the slide back. Incidentally, I'll just do a chrono now just to see if there was any actual difference in FPS. I don't think there should be, but well, I'll try it out just for science. Alright, let's just quickly chrono it. Yeah, looking at 220 still, so that's about what I was expecting anyway. 229. It was like maybe it gained a few FPS, but I mean that wasn't the idea of the exercise. We've sorted out what our issue was, and hopefully along the line there we've also learnt how to sort of follow the system of the GBB, so you can narrow down what particular section of your GBB isn't working, why you're having trouble. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll leave it at that. Don't forget you can buy me a coffee, or you can buy a patch. Links in the description. Thanks for watching. Peace.